The wind howled across the plains of Wyoming Territory as Eliza Vale hurried through the storm, her cloak whipping around her ankles. The year was 1875, and life on the frontier had taught her that death rode just as freely as any cowboy across these untamed lands. Tonight, she feared he was coming for the stranger she'd found collapsed near her property line. Eliza had spotted him from her cabin window, a lone rider slumped over his horse during the worst blizzard to hit the territory in years. By the time she'd reached him, the man's horse had stopped, sensing its master's distress, while he lay half-conscious in the saddle, burning with fever. It had taken all her strength to drag him back to her modest homestead. Her father had left her the claim when he passed last spring, and since then, Eliza had managed on her own, 23 years old, and determined to make the land work, despite the whispers in town that a woman couldn't handle such responsibility. The stranger now lay on her bed, his tall frame barely fitting the modest frame. His face, though pale with illness, was handsome beneath several days' growth of beard. Eliza soaked another cloth in cool water and pressed it to his forehead. "Madam," his voice startled her. His eyes, a striking blue, opened and focused on her face. "Where am I?" "My homestead, about 15 miles east of Laramie," she answered, wringing out the cloth. "Your horse brought you nearly to my doorstep. You're burning with fever." He attempted to sit up but fell back with a groan. "Patrick." "Patrick Archer," he managed. "Eliza Vale," she replied. "You shouldn't move. Whatever's ailing you has a fierce grip." "Mountain fever," he said, his voice raspy. "Caught it 3 days back, was trying to make it to Laramie." Eliza felt her stomach clench. Mountain fever was dangerous, highly contagious, and often fatal. "You need a doctor." "No time," Patrick coughed. "Storm's too bad. He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength for a man so ill. "You should stay away, you'll catch it too." Eliza pulled her hand free only to dip the cloth again. "Then we'll be sick together," she said firmly. "I'm not about to turn a dying man out in a blizzard." Patrick's eyes widened slightly before he closed them again. "Stubborn woman," he muttered. "I've been called worse," Eliza replied, settling into the chair beside him. As the night wore on, Patrick's fever worsened. He thrashed and mumbled, occasionally calling out names Eliza didn't recognize. She kept the fire blazing and changed his sweat-soaked clothes, modesty be damned. Her mother had taught her basic nursing before consumption took her 5 years earlier, and Eliza put every lesson to use. By dawn, the storm had passed, but Patrick's fever hadn't broken. Eliza hadn't slept, her eyes burning as she kept her vigil. "Why?" Patrick asked during a moment of lucidity. "Why risk yourself for a stranger?" Eliza wrung out another cloth. "My father always said that out here, kindness isn't optional, it's survival. Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," she said softly. Patrick studied her face. "You're alone here." It wasn't a question, but Eliza nodded anyway. "Since last spring. Dangerous for a woman alone. More dangerous to be a man with mountain fever with no one to care for him," she countered. The ghost of a smile crossed his parched lips. "Touché." As morning light filtered through the cabin windows, Eliza finally saw Patrick properly. Despite his illness, she could tell he was strong, his shoulders broad, his hands calloused from work. A gun belt hung on the bedpost where she'd placed it, the leather well worn but cared for. "You're a cowboy?" she asked, trying to keep him talking as she prepared a broth. "Of sorts," he replied, his voice weak. "Drive cattle sometimes. Lately been scouting for the railroad." "That explains why you're out in this weather. Not many travel in February. Needed to deliver maps." He drifted off again, sweat beading on his brow. For 3 days and nights, Eliza barely left Patrick's side. She slept in short bursts, always returning to check his fever, force water between his lips, or change the compresses. On the third night, his fever spiked so high she feared he wouldn't make it till morning. "Don't you dare die," she whispered fiercely, bathing his face and chest with cool water. "I didn't drag you in here and risk my health just to watch you die, Patrick Archer." As if he heard her, his eyes fluttered open. "Bossy woman," he muttered. "Someone has to be," she retorted, relief making her voice sharper than intended. "Drink this." She held a cup of willow bark tea to his lips. After he managed a few sips, Patrick caught her hand. "You haven't left, have you?" Eliza felt her cheeks warm. "I told you we'd be sick together, and are you sick?" She shook her head. "Not yet. Maybe I'm too stubborn for fever." His laugh turned into a cough. "I believe that." By morning of the fourth day, Patrick's fever finally broke. Eliza, exhausted beyond measure, had fallen asleep in the chair beside him. She woke to find him watching her, his eyes clearer than they'd been since she'd found him. "You look terrible," were his first words. Eliza snorted. "You're welcome for saving your life." "I mean it," he said, his voice stronger. "You haven't slept." "I've slept enough." She stood, stretching her stiff muscles. "Are you hungry? You should eat something." "Eliza," he said her name softly, stopping her. "Thank you, I'd be dead if not for you." The sincerity in his voice made her uncomfortable. She wasn't used to gratitude or to anyone using her given name so casually. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Patrick shook his head. "They wouldn't have. Most would have left me to die rather than risk the fever." Eliza busied herself at the stove. "Well, you're not dead, so now we need to get some food into you." Over the next few days, Patrick regained his strength slowly. Though still weak, he insisted on moving to a pallet by the fire rather than occupying Eliza's bed. "I've imposed enough," he said firmly when she protested. "You're still recovering. You need proper rest." "And you need your bed back," he countered. "I've watched you rubbing your neck from sleeping in that chair. I'm well enough to move." His concern touched her, though she tried not to show it. It had been a long time since anyone had worried about her comfort. As Patrick recovered, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. He was too weak to do much, but he insisted on helping with small tasks, whittling kindling, mending a chair with a loose leg, even attempting to cook, though his first efforts were barely edible. "This is awful," Eliza laughed, sampling his attempt at biscuits one morning. "Better than nothing," he defended, though his eyes crinkled with amusement. "Debatable," she replied, tossing the rock-hard disc into the slop bucket. Their conversations grew longer as Patrick's strength returned. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about fighting for the Union during the war despite his family's Southern sympathies, about his work for the railroad and his dreams of saving enough money to buy land someday. "Why Wyoming?" she asked one evening as they sat by the fire. "It's wild still," he replied, his eyes reflecting the flames. "A man can breathe here, make his own way without the weight of the past." Eliza understood that sentiment too well. "Is that why you left Missouri, the weight of the past?" Patrick was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "Partially," he finally said. "After the war, things weren't the same. My brother fought for the Confederacy. He didn't make it home." His voice grew distant. "Our parents never really recovered from having sons on opposite sides. The farm failed. I couldn't stay and watch everything fall apart." "I'm sorry," Eliza said softly. He shrugged. "It was a long time ago now, but it still hurts." Patrick looked at her then, really looked at her. "Yes," he admitted. "Some wounds never fully heal." In that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of shared understanding. Eliza found herself telling him about her own past. Her mother's slow death from consumption, her father's determination to give her a future in Wyoming, the fiancé back east who'd broken their engagement when she refused to abandon her father's dream. His loss, Patrick said when she finished. I wasn't what he wanted, Eliza replied, staring into her tea. He wanted a proper city wife who'd host dinner parties and raise children who went to fine schools, not someone who could shoot a rifle and birth a calf. Sounds like a fool to me, Patrick said firmly. Those are far more useful skills out here. His words warmed her more than they should have. You're just saying that because I saved your life. I'm saying it because it's true, he countered. It takes courage to live out here alone, Eliza, more courage than most men I know possess. 2 weeks after Patrick arrived at her door, he was strong enough to stand without getting light-headed. Though still thin from his illness, his color had returned, and the danger had passed. I should be moving on soon, he said one morning as they shared breakfast. I've imposed on your hospitality too long. Eliza felt an unexpected pang at his words. You're not fully recovered yet, she protested. I'm well enough to ride, Patrick insisted. And you've done more than enough for a stranger who collapsed on your property. You're hardly a stranger anymore, she said softly, not meeting his eyes. Patrick was silent for a moment. No, he finally agreed. I suppose not. That afternoon, Eliza found him attempting to chop wood, a task far beyond his current strength. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, and his hands trembled with each swing of the axe. What do you think you're doing? She demanded, taking the axe from his unresisting grip. Trying to be useful before I leave, he panted. You need wood split. And you need to not kill yourself doing it, she snapped. Sit down before you fall down. To her surprise, he obeyed, sinking onto a nearby stump. I hate feeling useless. You're recovering from a fever that nearly killed you, Eliza reminded him, setting the axe aside. That's not being useless, it's being human. Patrick looked up at her, squinting against the winter sun. I'm not used to being taken care of. I've noticed, she said dryly. Is it so difficult to accept help from most people? Yes. His honesty surprised her. From you, less so. Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. Why is that? Patrick seemed to consider his answer carefully. Because you don't make a man feel weak for needing help. You just help without judgment. Eliza didn't know how to respond to that. She picked up the axe again and swung it, splitting a log with practiced ease. If you want to be useful, you can stack what I split, he smiled. Yes, madam. They worked in comfortable silence, Eliza swinging the axe while Patrick carefully stacked the split wood. It felt strangely domestic, this shared labor. When they finished, they returned to the cabin together, the winter sun beginning its early descent. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Patrick cleared his throat. I've been thinking. Eliza looked up from her mending. A dangerous pastime. His mouth quirked. Indeed. He hesitated, then plunged ahead. The maps I was carrying, they're important. The railroad is planning a new spur line through this territory, and my employer needs those delivered to the company office in Laramie. You still need to rest before making that journey. I know, he agreed, but I was wondering if it wouldn't be too much trouble. Just say it, Patrick, he met her gaze directly. Would you consider delivering them for me? I'd pay you, of course. It's only a day's ride to Laramie, and you'd be saving my reputation with the company. Eliza considered the request. She needed to go to town for supplies soon anyway, and extra money was always useful on a homestead. I could go the day after tomorrow, she decided. The weather looks to be holding. Relief washed over his face. Thank you. I'll write a letter explaining the delay. Will you be all right here alone? I'd have to stay overnight in town. Patrick nodded. I'm well enough to tend the fire and feed myself. I promise not to burn down your home while you're gone. See that you don't, she said with mock sternness. I've grown rather attached to it. 2 days later, Eliza prepared for her journey to town. She hadn't left Patrick alone since bringing him to her cabin, and she found herself strangely reluctant to leave. "I've made enough stew to last you until tomorrow evening," she fussed, checking her saddlebags. "And there's bread wrapped in the cloth by the stove." "Don't try to chop more wood, Eliza," Patrick interrupted her gently, amusement in his eyes. "I'll be fine. I'm not planning to run a cattle drive while you're gone." She felt her cheeks warm. "I know that, you're worried," he finished for her. "It's endearing." The word caught her off guard. No one had called her endearing before. Stubborn, yes. Capable, occasionally. But never endearing. "I'm practical," she corrected, avoiding his eyes. "It would be inconvenient to return and find you've undone all my nursing by doing something foolish." Patrick stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the soap she'd made herself on his skin. "I'll be careful," he promised, his voice softer. "For you." The moment stretched between them, taut with something Eliza wasn't ready to name. She stepped back, breaking the tension. "See that you are," she said briskly. "I should reach town by nightfall. I'll stay at the boarding house and return tomorrow afternoon." Patrick nodded, watching as she mounted her horse. "Ride safely, Eliza Vale." The journey to Laramie was uneventful, though Eliza found her thoughts continually drifting back to her cabin to Patrick. It unsettled her, this preoccupation with a man she'd known for such a short time. In town, she delivered the maps to the railroad office as promised. The manager seemed surprised to receive them from her rather than Patrick, but was grateful nonetheless. "Mr. Archer is one of our most reliable scouts," he told her, examining the maps. "We were concerned when he didn't arrive on schedule." "He was quite ill," Eliza explained. "Mountain fever." The manager winced. "And yet he survived. He's fortunate you found him when you did, Miss Vale." After completing her business at the railroad office, Eliza purchased her supplies: flour, coffee, sugar, ammunition, and a few other necessities. On impulse, she also bought a small bag of peppermint drops. Patrick had mentioned they were his favorite. At the general store, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "Heard there's a gang operating between here and Cheyenne," a grizzled old-timer was saying. "The Blackwell brothers. They've hit 3 homesteads in the last month, killing folks," asked his companion. "2 men dead so far. They don't leave witnesses, from what I hear." Eliza's hands tightened on her purchases. Her homestead lay in the very area they were discussing. "The marshals organizing a posse," the storekeeper added, wrapping Eliza's purchases. "But those Blackwells are slippery as eels. Been operating from Kansas to Montana with no one catching them yet." Eliza finished her business quickly and secured a room at the boarding house, but sleep eluded her. She kept thinking of Patrick alone at her cabin, still weak from his illness. If the Blackwells came across her property. She left at first light, pushing her horse harder than was wise given the winter conditions. The journey that had taken her a full day going to town took only hours returning, her anxiety spurring her onward. When her cabin finally came into view, smoke rising peacefully from the chimney, relief washed over her. She urged her mount forward, only to pull up short when she spotted an unfamiliar horse tethered outside. Drawing her rifle from its scabbard, Eliza approached cautiously. The door to her cabin opened and Patrick appeared, tension evident in his stance until he recognized her. "Eliza," he exhaled, relief evident. "You're back early. Who's inside?" she demanded, not lowering her rifle. Patrick held up his hands. "A friend, Samuel Johnson. He's a railroad man like me. He was passing through and saw smoke from your chimney. I know him, he's trustworthy." Eliza dismounted warily. "In these parts, unexpected visitors aren't always welcome." "I understand," Patrick said, approaching to take her horse's reins. "But Sam brought news we need to hear." Inside the cabin, Eliza found a middle-aged man with a weathered face seated at her table. He stood when she entered, removing his hat. "Madam," he greeted her respectfully. "Samuel Johnson, I apologize for intruding on your hospitality." "Mr. Johnson," she acknowledged, setting her rifle aside but within reach. "Patrick says you have news." Sam exchanged a glance with Patrick. "The Blackwell gang," he said simply. "They've been spotted near Laramie. The marshal believes they're targeting isolated homesteads in this area." "I heard as much in town," Eliza confirmed, unpacking her supplies with hands that weren't quite steady. "They've killed before." "They have," Sam agreed grimly. "And they'll kill again. I came to warn Patrick. I didn't know he was recovering here until I saw him. But now I'm warning you both. This isn't a safe place for either of you right now." "This is my home," Eliza said firmly. "I'm not abandoning it." "Eliza," Patrick began. "No," she cut him off. "My father died making this place work. I won't run at the first sign of trouble." Sam looked between them, sensing the tension. "The railroad has a secure lodging house in Laramie," he offered, "for employees and their friends. You'd both be welcome there until the marshal deals with the Blackwells." "Thank you, but no," Eliza replied, her tone brooking no argument. "This is my land. I'll defend it if necessary." Sam sighed, standing. "I can see you've made up your mind. I should continue on need to warn others in the area." He turned to Patrick. "You coming with me? You're still supposed to be recovering, according to the doctor I spoke with in town." Patrick looked at Eliza, something unreadable in his expression. "No," he said finally. "I can't leave Miss Vale here alone, not with the Blackwells in the area." "Patrick, you don't need to," Eliza began. "I do," he interrupted. "You stayed with me when I was sick. I'm staying with you now that you're in danger." Sam looked between them again, a small smile playing at his lips. "I see. Well then, I'll let the company know where to find you both." He donned his hat. "Be careful. Those Blackwells don't play by any rules." After Sam departed, an awkward silence fell between Eliza and Patrick. "You don't have to stay," she said finally, putting away the last of her supplies. "You're still recovering. You'd be safer in town." Patrick leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "Do you really think I'd leave you here alone?" "I've been alone for months," she reminded him. "I can handle myself." "I know you can," he said softly. "That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Patrick?" she demanded, suddenly tired. He pushed away from the doorframe, crossing the small space between them. "The point is that I care what happens to you, Eliza Vale, more than I should, perhaps, given how short a time we've known each other." Eliza's heart hammered in her chest at his words, at his proximity. "Patrick, let me finish," he said gently. "You saved my life. You sat beside me all night when I was at my worst. You didn't have to do that. You could have left me to die, or at the very least kept your distance. But you didn't. You said, then we'll be sick together." "Do you know what that meant to me?" She shook her head, unable to find words. "It meant I wasn't alone," Patrick continued, his voice low and intense. "For the first time in years, I wasn't facing something terrible alone. You have no idea how powerful that is, Eliza." "I think I do," she whispered. Something in her tone made him pause. "What do you mean?" "These past weeks," she admitted, "having you here. It's the first time since my father died that I haven't felt completely alone." Patrick's expression softened. "Then you understand why I can't leave. Whatever comes, be it Blackwell's gang or another blizzard, we'll face it together." The conviction in his voice stirred something in Eliza she'd thought long dormant: hope, not just for survival but for connection, for something more than merely existing. "Together," she agreed quietly. They spent the rest of the day preparing the cabin for potential trouble. Patrick, though still not at full strength, helped Eliza board up the smaller windows, leaving only narrow slits for rifle barrels. They brought extra water inside and moved everything of value to the root cellar beneath the kitchen floor, a hiding place her father had dug for emergencies. As evening approached, Eliza cooked while Patrick cleaned their rifles with practiced hands. "You handle that gun like a man who's used it," she observed. Patrick nodded, not looking up from his work. "The war taught me that, then life out west reinforced the lesson." "Have you killed men outside of the war, I mean?" His hands stilled. "Yes," he said simply, "when I had no choice." Eliza stirred the stew, considering his answer. "I've never killed anyone," she admitted. "Animals for food, yes, but never a person." "I hope you never have to," Patrick said quietly. "It changes you, even when it's necessary." They ate dinner in companionable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling around the cabin's eaves. It would be another cold night. "I'll take first watch," Patrick offered as they cleared the dishes. "You should rest." Eliza shook her head. "You're still recovering. I'll take first watch." "Stubborn woman," he muttered, but there was affection in his tone. "Difficult man," she countered with a small smile. In the end, they compromised. They moved the table away from the window that faced the approach to the cabin, and positioned 2 chairs side by side. They would watch together, at least for the first part of the night. As darkness settled fully over the landscape, Eliza felt a strange sense of peace despite the danger. Patrick sat beside her, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they scanned the moonlit terrain beyond the window. "Tell me about your dreams," he said suddenly, his voice low in the quiet cabin. "Not just surviving here, what do you want from life, Eliza?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in a very long time. "I want this land to flourish," she began slowly. "I want to see the orchard my father planted bear fruit. I want cattle grazing in the lower meadow." "And for yourself," Patrick pressed gently, "beyond the land." Eliza hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I want what most women want, I suppose. Family, children, someone to share the burden and the joy." She glanced at him. "What about you? You mentioned wanting land someday." "I do," he confirmed. "Somewhere like this, actually. Remote enough for peace, but close enough to town for necessities." He paused. "And like you, I want someone to share it with. Children, eventually." The air between them seemed to thicken with possibilities neither was ready to voice. Eliza broke the tension first. "You think they'll come?" "The Blackwells?" Patrick's expression turned serious again. "I don't know, but if they do, we'll be ready." 3 tense days passed without incident. By the 4th day, Eliza began to hope that perhaps the Blackwells had moved on to other territory. She and Patrick settled into a routine that felt surprisingly natural, sharing chores, taking turns at watch, talking long into the evenings. On the 5th morning, Eliza woke to find Patrick already up, coffee brewing on the stove. He stood by the window, his posture alert. "What is it?" she asked, reaching for her robe. "Riders," he said tightly. 3 of them coming from the east." Eliza joined him at the window. In the distance, she could make out 3 mounted figures approaching slowly. "Could be anyone," she said, but her hand reached for the rifle leaning against the wall. "Could be," Patrick agreed, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "But they're coming from the wrong direction for casual travelers. The main trail is north of here." "What do we do?" Patrick considered their options. "If it is the Blackwells, they'll expect the cabin to be occupied by a lone woman. They won't expect me to be here." "We could use that to our advantage," Eliza said, thinking quickly. "If I appear to be alone." "No," Patrick's response was immediate and firm. "I won't use you as bait." "Not bait," she countered. "A distraction. I'll greet them outside while you cover me from the window." Patrick shook his head. "Too dangerous. If they're who we fear, they won't hesitate to shoot you the moment they realize something's wrong." "Then what do you suggest?" Eliza demanded, watching the riders draw closer. They had minutes at most to decide on a strategy. Patrick ran a hand through his hair, thinking rapidly. The root cellar. Is there enough space for both of us to hide? Yes, but we let them enter thinking the cabin's empty. They'll likely search for valuables. When they're distracted, we'll have the advantage of surprise. Eliza didn't like the plan. Hiding in her own home felt like surrender, but she had to admit it gave them better odds than confrontation. Fine, she agreed reluctantly, but we need to move quickly. They doused the fire, hiding the fact that the cabin had been recently occupied. Eliza grabbed essential supplies while Patrick checked their weapons. Just as the riders came within hailing distance, they slipped into the root cellar beneath the kitchen floor, pulling the trapdoor closed above them. The space was cramped and dark, forcing them to sit pressed together. Patrick's arm went around Eliza's shoulders, both for comfort and to keep her still. Above them, they heard the sound of horses approaching, then stopping. Men's voices, rough, unfamiliar, called out, "Hello, the house. Anyone home?" Silence followed the call. Then the sound of boots on the porch, the door opening. "Looks empty," a voice said. "But someone's been here recent. Ashes in the stove are still warm." "Search it," ordered another voice deeper than the first. "Johnson, check the barn, might be horses there." Eliza tensed at the name, remembering Patrick's friend who had visited days earlier. These couldn't be the same men, which meant they were likely the Blackwells. Footsteps moved across the floor above them. Drawers opened and closed as the men searched for valuables. Eliza felt Patrick's arm tighten around her when the footsteps approached the kitchen. "Nothing worth taking," complained the first voice. "Just some woman's things and a few supplies." "Someone's living here," the deeper voice replied. "Might be worth waiting to see who comes back." Eliza's blood ran cold at the implication. Patrick's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing reassuringly. "Johnson's coming back," the first voice announced. "Doesn't look happy." The door opened again. "2 horses in the barn," a third voice reported. "Saddled and ready. Whoever's here can't be far." A heavy silence followed this revelation. Then, ominously, the sound of furniture being moved directly above them. "What's this?" the deep voice asked. "Looks like some kind of trapdoor." Patrick moved swiftly, positioning himself between Eliza and the trapdoor, his gun drawn. She drew her own weapon, heart hammering as they waited for the inevitable. The trapdoor swung open, flooding the small space with light. A bearded face peered down at them, surprise giving way to malicious delight. Well, what have we here?" Everything happened at once. Patrick fired, hitting the man in the shoulder. The wounded outlaw fell back with a howl of pain. Patrick pushed Eliza behind him as he scrambled up through the opening, firing again at a second man who charged from across the room. Eliza followed, emerging into chaos. A third outlaw burst through the front door, weapon raised. Without hesitation, she fired, hitting him in the leg. He staggered but didn't fall, returning fire that splintered the wood beside her head. Patrick tackled the wounded outlaw, wrestling for control of his gun. Eliza took cover behind the overturned table as the man she'd shot limped toward her, his face contorted with rage. "You'll pay for that, bitch," he snarled, raising his gun. Eliza fired again, her shot truer this time. The outlaw dropped, clutching his chest. She had no time to process what she'd done. Patrick was still struggling with the leader, both men locked in a desperate battle for survival. The first outlaw, the one Patrick had shot in the shoulder, was attempting to rise from the floor, reaching for a fallen weapon. Eliza kicked it away, then brought the butt of her rifle down on his head. He slumped, unconscious. Patrick and the leader crashed into the stove, knocking it over. Coals spilled across the wooden floor, smoking dangerously. The outlaw got the upper hand momentarily, slamming Patrick against the wall with enough force to daze him. "Patrick!" Eliza cried out, raising her rifle. The outlaw spun, using Patrick as a shield. "Drop it," he ordered, pressing his gun to Patrick's temple. "Or he dies." Eliza hesitated, her rifle still trained on them both. "Let him go," she demanded, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Not happening, sweetheart," the outlaw sneered. "Drop the gun or I paint the wall with his brains." Patrick's eyes met Eliza's over the outlaw's shoulder. Despite the gun at his head, he gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. Understanding flashed between them. Eliza lowered her rifle slowly, as if complying. The moment the outlaw's attention shifted toward her, Patrick drove his elbow backward with all his strength. The outlaw's grip loosened just enough for Patrick to spin away, leaving him exposed. Eliza raised her rifle in one fluid motion and fired. The outlaw staggered back, a look of disbelief crossing his face before he collapsed. For a moment, neither Eliza nor Patrick moved, the echo of the gunshot ringing in the small cabin. Then Patrick rushed to her side. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands checking her for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her voice shook. "Nothing serious." He glanced around at the three fallen outlaws. "We need to check them." The next hours passed in a blur. Two of the outlaws were dead, including the leader, whom Patrick identified as James Blackwell himself. The third, the one Eliza had knocked unconscious, was bound securely with rope. The coals from the overturned stove had burned a section of flooring but hadn't spread further. Patrick insisted on riding to town to fetch the marshal, despite Eliza's concerns about his strength. While he was gone, she kept watch over their prisoner, her mind struggling to process everything that had happened. She had killed a man today, perhaps two. The knowledge settled heavily in her chest. Patrick had been right, it changed you, even when necessary. When he returned with the marshal and two deputies, Eliza felt a wave of relief so profound her knees nearly buckled. Patrick was at her side instantly, supporting her with a strong arm around her waist. "You're safe now," he murmured against her hair. "It's over." The marshal took their statements and the surviving outlaw into custody. The bodies were loaded onto horses for return to town. "You two are lucky to be alive," the marshal told them gravely. "The Blackwells have killed everyone they've encountered so far. You did what you had to do." After the lawman departed, Eliza surveyed the damage to her home. The overturned furniture could be righted, the burned section of floor replaced. The bloodstains would be harder to remove. "We should clean up," she said numbly, staring at a dark stain on the floorboards. Patrick gently turned her away from the sight. "Tomorrow," he said firmly. "Right now you need rest." "I don't think I can sleep," she confessed. "Every time I close my eyes I see." "I know," he said softly. "Believe me, I know." They sat together before the fire that Patrick had rebuilt, neither speaking for a long time. Eliza's mind kept returning to the moment she'd pulled the trigger, the look on the outlaw's face as he fell. "Does it get easier?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible. Patrick didn't pretend to misunderstand. "No," he answered honestly, "nor should it. Taking a life should never be easy, Eliza, but the weight of it becomes bearable with time. I had no choice." "No, you didn't," he agreed, taking her hand. "You protected your home, you protected me." "There's no shame in that." Eliza squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his presence. "I'm glad you were here," she admitted. "I couldn't have faced them alone." "Yes, you could have," Patrick contradicted her gently. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Eliza Vale." "But I'm glad I was here too." Something in his tone made her look up at him. What she saw in his eyes took her breath away: admiration, respect, and something deeper, something that made her heart race. "Patrick, I should have left days ago," he said quietly. I'm well enough to travel. The railroad is expecting me back, but I couldn't bring myself to go. Why not? She asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Because in all my years of wandering, I've never felt at home anywhere the way I feel here with you. His hand lifted to touch her cheek. I know it's too soon. We've known each other only a few weeks, but sometimes life doesn't give us the luxury of time. Eliza leaned into his touch. No, she agreed softly. It doesn't. Patrick's gaze dropped to her lips, then returned to her eyes, asking a silent question. In answer, Eliza closed the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, a stark contrast to the violence they'd survived hours earlier. When they separated, Patrick rested his forehead against hers. I don't want to leave, he confessed. But I have obligations to the railroad, a contract. I understand, Eliza said, though the thought of him leaving made her chest ache. You have to go. For now, he agreed. But Eliza, I want to come back if you'll have me. She pulled back slightly to see his face. What are you saying? Patrick took both her hands in his. I'm saying that I think I'm falling in love with you, Eliza Vale, and I'm asking if you might consider giving me a chance to prove it. Eliza's breath caught. Part of her wanted to be cautious. They'd known each other such a short time, had been through extraordinary circumstances that might have heightened their feelings. But a deeper part recognized the truth in his words, and in her own heart. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she admitted softly. And yes, I'd like you to come back. The smile that lit Patrick's face was worth every moment of doubt. When I return, he said, we'll talk about the future, our future if you want that. I do, Eliza replied with certainty. Very much. 3 months later, the Wyoming spring was beginning to transform the landscape. The snow had receded, revealing the first tender shoots of new grass. Eliza stood on her porch, watching the eastern trail as she had every day for the past week. Patrick's letters had arrived regularly since he'd left detailed accounts of his work for the railroad, plans for his return, and increasingly open declarations of his feelings for her. His last letter had promised he would arrive by the first week of May, his contract with the railroad complete. Today was May 3rd. Eliza shaded her eyes against the morning sun, her heart leaping when she spotted a lone rider approaching from the east. Even at a distance, she recognized the way Patrick sat a horse. Abandoning all pretense of dignity, she lifted her skirts and ran to meet him. Patrick dismounted when he saw her coming, his smile wide enough to split his face. They met in the middle of the meadow, Patrick catching her in an embrace that lifted her off her feet. You're here, she laughed as he spun her around. You're finally here. I'd have crawled back if necessary, he replied, setting her down but not releasing her. God, I've missed you, Eliza. Their kiss was nothing like their first. This one was confident, passionate, the reunion of two people who had found in each other something worth waiting for. When they finally broke apart, Patrick kept her close, his expression growing serious. I have something to ask you. Ask, she said simply. He took a small box from his pocket. I've saved enough to buy land, he told her. Good land not far from here, but I don't want it without you. He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band. Eliza Vale, will you marry me? Eliza's vision blurred with tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Patrick Archer, I will absolutely marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Eliza thought of that stormy night months ago, when she'd made the fateful decision to help a dying stranger. You'll catch it too, he'd warned her, speaking of mountain fever. Then we'll be sick together, she'd replied. Instead, they'd caught something else entirely, something that had healed rather than harmed. Something that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Love. Eliza decided as Patrick kissed her again beneath the vast Wyoming sky, was the most contagious thing of all. and she was perfectly content to have caught it. They were married 2 weeks later in Laramie, with Sam Johnson standing as Patrick's best man and the local schoolteacher as Eliza's matron of honor. The small church was filled with well-wishers, Eliza's neighbors, and the railroad men who had worked with Patrick. The marshal who had taken the surviving Blackwell into custody raised a glass to them at the celebration afterward. "To the couple brave enough to face down the Blackwell gang," he toasted, "may your life together be considerably less dangerous." Everyone laughed, but Eliza and Patrick exchanged a private glance that spoke volumes. They had faced death together and emerged stronger. Whatever life threw at them now, they would face it the same way together. They combined their resources to purchase a larger parcel of land that encompassed Eliza's original homestead and expanded eastward, with better access to water and grazing land. Patrick's knowledge of the territory from his railroad work proved invaluable in selecting the additional acreage. By summer's end, they had begun construction on a larger home, one with enough rooms for the family they both hoped to have. Patrick proved as skilled with carpentry as he was with maps, designing a house that was both practical and beautiful. "My father would have approved," Eliza told him as they stood arm in arm, surveying the partially completed structure. "He always said a home should be built to grow with its family." Patrick pulled her closer. "I hope we'll fill every room," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Their first winter as husband and wife tested them in different ways than their first meeting had. A particularly harsh December storm collapsed part of the barn, trapping 2 of their horses. Patrick and Eliza worked through the night to free the animals and repair the damage enough to protect the rest of their livestock. As they stumbled back to their cabin, exhausted and chilled to the bone, Patrick laughed suddenly. "What's so funny?" Eliza asked, teeth chattering. "I was just thinking our first winter together had me delirious with fever while you nursed me back to health. This winter, we're both half frozen trying to save horses in a blizzard." He shook his head. "We seem to attract extreme situations." "As long as we're facing them together," Eliza replied, huddling closer to his side. "I don't mind." When spring arrived again, bringing with it their first anniversary, Eliza had news to share. She waited until they'd finished planting the vegetative garden, then took Patrick's hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. His eyes widened in understanding. "Eliza, are you?" She nodded, her smile radiant. "The doctor in town confirmed it last week. We'll have a little one by fall." Patrick whooped with joy, lifting her carefully and spinning her around just as he had the day he returned to her. "A baby," he marveled when he set her down. "Our baby." "The first of many, I hope," Eliza said, laughing at his enthusiasm. "As many as you want," he promised, dropping to his knees to press a gentle kiss to her stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your mama and papa can't wait to meet you." Eliza ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man and the family they were creating together. From the brink of death to the miracle of new life, their journey had come full circle. Their son, William James Archer, was born on a crisp October morning in 1877, with a lusty cry that announced his arrival to the world. He had Patrick's blue eyes and Eliza's determined chin. "He's perfect," Patrick whispered as he held his son for the first time. "Of course he is," Eliza replied tiredly from the bed. "He's ours." As William grew, so did their ranch. They added cattle and expanded their orchards. The railroad Patrick had once worked for built a station 10 miles away, making it easier to ship their goods to market. By the time their daughter, Margaret, arrived 2 years after William, the Archer Ranch was becoming one of the most prosperous in the territory. On cold winter evenings, when the children were tucked into bed, Patrick and Eliza would sit before the fire in the home they'd built together. Sometimes they would reminisce about their unusual beginning, the fever, the Blackwell gang, the improbable love that had grown between two strangers thrown together by fate. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me that night?" Patrick asked once. "If my horse had wandered in a different direction?" Eliza considered the question. "I believe we would have found each other eventually," she said with certainty. "Some things are meant to be, Patrick. We're one of them." He smiled, pulling her close. "You know, that first night when you insisted on staying by my side despite the risk of infection. That's when I began to fall in love with you. Even delirious with fever, I knew you were extraordinary." "It was a simple choice," Eliza replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "You needed me." "I still do," he murmured. "Every day." As their family grew to include 4 children and their ranch flourished, Eliza and Patrick never forgot the lesson of their first meeting, that sometimes the greatest strength is found not in facing adversity alone, but in facing it together. Whether illness or outlaw, drought or blizzard, they stood united, the bond forged in those desperate days growing stronger with each passing year. By the time Wyoming became a state in 1890, the Archer Ranch was a landmark in the region, and Patrick and Eliza were respected community leaders. Their children grew tall and strong in the land their parents had claimed and defended, and on quiet nights, when the moon illuminated the plains and mountains beyond their window, they would still sometimes whisper those words that had changed everything. "You'll catch it too. Then we'll be sick together." Words that had defined not just a moment, but a lifetime of facing whatever came together.